Hi listeners, it's Joel here. I am the latest Radio Spätkauf team member to get to try AG1, and let me tell you, it is delicious. I have some very early starts to the day in my schedule, and I was up at 5 a.m. today. So the first thing I did was have a big glass of water with AG1. I opened the packet, mixed a scoop in, and it tasted great. Green goodness is the only way I can describe it. It has 75 high-quality ingredients, vitamins, minerals, botanicals, bacterial cultures, and real food ingredients, and they're formulated to be well absorbed by the body. Now, I already eat pretty healthy, and AG1 is meant to support daily nutritional supply and give you a strong start to the day. And I had a strong start. I felt great the whole day. You too can try it with a special offer for Radio Spätkauf listeners. You get a subscription. You can get it delivered to your door every month without a contract period so that you can pause or cancel or adjust the delivery at any time. And there's also a 90-day money-back guarantee to test it out for 3 months without any risk. We've also got a special code, and if you use that, you get a year's free supply of vitamin D3 and K2 and some travel packs. You should go to athleticgreens.com/Spätkauf. And if you missed that link, you can always find it in our show notes. Thank you to AG1 for supporting Radio Spätkauf. On with the show.
Radio Spätkauf. Berlin News in English.
Sunday, May 28th, 2023, and this is Radio Spätkauf recording outdoors at Tempelhofer Feld. I'm Matilda Kaiser.
I'm Daniel Stern.
I'm Jöran Mandik.
Yeah.
The one time we don't write it in the script.
And there's Joel. Right. And welcome to the lovely audience who trekked out here to listen to us record an unamplified episode in the middle of a park while people all around us play and enjoy the freedom of both the ascension of Jesus and a Sunday afternoon in the sun. Thanks for coming out, guys.
Thank you. Coming up, cyclists, get ready to ring your bells angrily. The new city government wants to shrink bike lanes and is turning car-free zones into roads. We hear about the new war on bikes. Also, what hope is there for the referendum that sought to expropriate apartments from big private landlords? We get an update about Deutsche Wohnen and Co Enteignen from our friend Wouter Bernhard. And Berlin's top former football team have officially failed and fallen out of the top league. Our sports expert Jöran will tell us about this epic tragedy. Meanwhile, how is everybody?
Well, I've pretty much. Hey, everything's going great. I got a nice little dose of COVID.
Oh, that's still around.
Yeah, no, it is. I moved into my backyard. My flat does not allow for the isolation between family members in any way that won't get us all. So last time we got it, we just went out, bought a tent, and that's where I lived for about a week.
How's your back?
Week and a half. My back is great. I mean, honestly,
that is a strong
Did
back.
you think about moving into the tent permanently?
There's ups and downs to the tent. Like I didn't have to share it with 2-3 other people. I didn't step on a single Lego.
What did you do for toilet?
Oh, I had a watering can, which I thought was working great because I'd lost my sense of smell. I was like, oh, I'm cured once I realized how disgusting that was. You're probably wondering, let's not get more. That was just for number one.
It's a nice perk for ground floor living, though.
Yeah, it is a perk of the Erdgeschoss.
Couldn't fit
You know what? It's more of an Erdgeschloss, the way I live it. Oh, yeah. You didn't. Sorry, my son's. What was that? I was peeing in the watering can, yeah. You didn't know about that? Yeah.
Wow, we are sorting out family dramas live on tape.
Dan had to live in a tent. I'm sorry for your week of hardship, and I guess it's a good reminder that COVID still exists. I'd forgotten about it.
I got it. You know what? I was well rested and recovered by the end. I also I've never had such a mind-altering experience just on an infection. Like, I remember looking at a door and being like, I know how you work, but come on. This is not, I don't remember it being this complicated. Yeah.
So I've had a bit of a post-COVID experience. I was walking past the local test centre up next to Lidl on the Hermannstrasse. If anyone's been past that in the last couple of days, it is being dismantled and turned into something else, and that was quite a quite a moment for me looking at that and being like, oh, it's over. Is it over, the Snell testing? It's done now.
Yeah.
Do any still exist? I'm surprised any exist.
There's like
it
a
hung
few.
on for a long time,
There's
that one.
one that'll come to you. Like that's their niche. And they're not free anymore. Because I was like the first day when I was like I might have COVID. I was like I'll just go. It's probably not COVID. I'll go get a what are those things called when the fancy ones? A PDR, a ZPN.
We've all forgotten already.
PCR.
No, it's a
Come on,
VPN. A VPN test.
I mean,
and,
it does show the power
couldn't
of
get
this, the power of this infection. That we are over the pandemic. The UN has officially said it's done, guys. It's over, and we're still goddamn talking about it.
I'm happy I've forgotten the details, though. Yeah. But speaking of positive things...
So, yes, Carnival der Kulturen is back after a 3-year absence. So this weekend, the streets around Hallisches Tor have been full of crowds enjoying street food, cocktails and music. The festival is celebrating its 25th year happening. So it would be a 25th year anniversary if it had happened 3 years ago, but it's just the 25th year that it's actually happened. And it started originally in 1996. So it's been running since Wednesday last week. The festival will reach peak around 10 minutes after we finish this recording, with the parade going through Kreuzberg of all the cultures of Berlin. Well, barring the Indians, who are usually represented by white Hare Krishnas. So there are about 48 parade groups, and there's also a children's carnival that I think happened yesterday. So Hallisches Tor has been awash with revelers in the last days and will continue until the end of the Pentecost holiday on Monday. So, anyone going?
Of course.
Yes, Dan and I accidentally got stuck in the carnival traffic trying to come here with a huge bike full of equipment. I was worried I'd missed the parade, but it turns out we walked all the way through the parade.
Yeah, that was inconvenient, and I fell over the cargo bike and am bleeding on the backside of my body.
Aside from Dan's injury, I am so happy the carnival is back. I remember a few years ago being a kind of a bit of a hater of carnival. I think I dissed it on this show, being like, oh, it's all just caipirinhas and drunk people. But I was so happy to see it back.
My
it was
God.
But
It's
that's
so
the
wonderful.
real culture of this city, isn't it?
It was
Did
joyful,
you-
it was colourful.
Did you go and find the Venezuelans and tell them, oh, hey, I've been to Caracas very recently?
I really love eating the arepas in Caracas.
I do think I had to go.
Did I tell you I've been to Colombia?
I think I had to go to see the culture to come back and understand why we do it here. Like, I finally get it. I see it, I saw it, and I thought, yeah, okay, I understand now. And that's why I'm wearing this fantastic shirt.
You are wearing a fantastic shirt.
It's also like you can take one food stand and like a parade, just like a few minutes of it passing by you, and extrapolate all your cultural biases. Positive biases based upon just that. You can just say, I love the Colombians just have great hats, and that's as an American all I need to know.
I'm just happy it's back, is all I can say. It's the one thing about Berlin. It's kind of it's like Weihnachtsmarkt in summer. It's just this fantastic.
Yeah,
place
but
to go.
it's like I kind of disagree, because it's like I get so happy that I don't have to be invited to places where I have to eat standing up, surrounded by people I hate, because that just happens in winter. And now it's like we're still doing it.
Oh, are you a downer?
I am a downer, okay?
Okay.
You know what? There's a reason restaurants have chairs. That's all I'll say to it. And when restaurants start saying no seating, here's your food, eat it out of a paper plate that is sogging up in your
Have
hand.
you heard of street food?
What?
Street food, huge trend.
Street food you get
Can
and
I-
you eat and walk.
Matilda, this goes so against one of your core brand principles,
I know.
the street salad.
Okay, but the street salad is eaten in solitude, okay, sitting down.
So this isn't about chairs, it's about people.
It's about people and standing.
Okay.
And crowds. All right. I've made myself unsympathisch enough. Let's move on.
Yes.
Let's move on. Jöran, you want to tell us the next one?
Yeah, who knows what a paternoster is?
Paternoster.
Nobody.
That's the mafia that controls. What's pata?
It controls elevators.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the mafia that controls elevators. No, it is an ancient type of elevator, though, from the 1800s. And it has like a series of open door carriages that just go up and down without stopping on a continuous loop. So when you want to get off, you got to just time it well, jump out or jump in, respectively, which can be quite dangerous. And the name is a religious reference, of course, to Paternoster, which means Our Father, and is the first couple of words of the so-called Lord's Prayer, which people should recite before trying to get into one of these elevators.
What do you mean by so-called Lord's Prayer?
Well, it is called that.
Oh, okay.
It is called the
Well,
Lord's
usually
Prayer.
when you say so-called, that's like because it's a sort of not what it's called. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm
it
going to
was
stop
in the
riffing
script,
and let
all
this
right?
thing go.
But anyway, there's a serious part to this bit of news. One man actually did die last week. An elderly man was fatally injured when he got stuck between the moving carriages on the first floor. And new paternosters have actually been banned since the 1970s, and old ones should have been stopped since 2015. But some people protested so they can keep functioning. And now we have still got about 25 of these in Berlin, mostly in government buildings, including in the Bundestag. Has anyone ever been in one of these?
No, but I've seen one
no.
on Babylon Berlin. That's
Yes.
it's a whole like plot
Rathaus
thing in Babylon.
Schöneberg, I think. That's another one.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a whole thing in Babylon
I've
Berlin.
not been, though.
They go up and down in them all the time.
I went in one in the old Neues Deutschland building, and they are quite scary. They're just a moving floor. You just step into it, it keeps going up. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised no one's died before in one.
I think they just didn't mention it.
No one died on a slow news day in one.
Should we just skip ahead now?
No Amazon?
No.
No, let's keep going.
Okay.
There's what people got? We're already 45 minutes behind.
All right, the new Amazon Tower is rapidly rising above Warschauer Straße, looking truly dystopian. The architecture looks very Blade Runner with serrated levels. It is going to be Berlin's tallest office building. Now that it's almost complete, some activists are campaigning against it, which is, a little bit too late. The Fight the Tower campaign says it doesn't expect the building to be demolished, but doesn't want Amazon to move in, because the company will bring lots of high-paid tech workers into the area and increase gentrification. The building is actually called Edge East Side Tower and will be 36 floors or 142 meters. But the TV tower at Alexanderplatz will still be higher. The restaurant there is 200 meters up in the sky.
How does everyone like the tower?
It's gross.
I honestly hadn't noticed.
Why is it so big,
Where is it?
It's next to Warschauer Straße.
Oh, it's that big building
yeah,
there?
it's a huge thing.
Oh, that's
yeah.
fine.
You can't miss it. It's
I
massive.
don't know. I didn't realize what
It's
it was.
outsized, isn't it? It
It's
seems
massive.
wrong.
But it was like, it's just an empty space and now there's a thing there. Like, what else can we do?
It's a building.
It's going to be, Friedrichshain's going to be like Seattle soon, I guess. Huh?
Oh, really? Like a mandatory hiking?
Wait, do we have to buy Subarus?
Yeah, you're going to need an Arc'teryx jacket
Oh, okay.
to enter. But you could never leave.
So, in breaking Berlin transport news, raccoons have been discovered giving public transport a go in the city. On Tuesday last week, a Berlin bus driver sitting at a stop in Tempelhofer Dam discovered a raccoon had boarded his bus whilst he was on a break. The driver called the police, who then called a conservation ranger, and who came and quickly found the raccoon's mum in the area and released the raccoon back into the vicinity close to its mummy thereafter.
Important question. Did he have a ticket?
No. Should have bought one.
I think they figured out that these mics aren't plugged into anything. This is just crazy people.
We do look crazy, don't we?
No, actually, I have to say, this is... Like, I have never been so happy looking at, like, a group of people gathered to do this. But I mean, I've been pretty happy about it before. But this is really lovely.
It looks really nice.
Yeah.
My sister's
All right.
here. Shout out to my sister.
Hey,
She's here.
sister.
Hey.
First time ever. And now on with the news?
Yes, on with the news.
Okay.
We did one page.
Berlin's former mayor, Klaus Wowereit, has proposed a new slogan to replace his own famous poor but sexy to describe the city under its new government. And it is schwarz aber schillernd. So black but dazzling.
Black but dazzling. Now, when I first heard this, I flew into a woke rage. I thought he was talking about race, and I was angry on so many levels about it. But then I actually listened to the whole radio interview where he said this, and it turns out he was talking about political colors. That wasn't clear in any of the coverage about it. All the headline was just Wowereit, Schwarz, but Schillen. And in the articles, they never explained that. They just presumed that you would know that Germany has this whole thing about political colors, black meaning CDU. So he was talking about the new CDU-led government, which some reason he thinks will be dazzling, which I think is also worth outrage. So how dazzling is the new CDU-SPD coalition so far?
It sounds so bad. Like
As dazzling as the just utter darkness.
Yeah.
But dazzling is also kind of a term, like 1920s Weimar Berlin kind of word, isn't it? It's a bit antiquated.
Okay, Jöran. Are we really going to bring the Weimar Republic into this now?
Why is he choosing this word? It could have been like sparkly.
Because
Dazzling.
because it's Klaus Wowereit. He doesn't have to think about what he says. Everyone's going to be like, oh, Klausi, yeah, that's very nice. Thank you for thinking of us again. Like, nobody cares. Well, the CDU's war on bikes has begun. The first big announcement of the government is their plans to close the Friedrichstraße pedestrian zone, which had already happened once. Cars will be allowed to drive down the current footpath by the end of July. That's been decided by the new transport senator, Manja Schreiner.
So this signifies a shift in traffic policy under the new Black-Red coalition. It has angered the Greens, who initiated the policy, although the prominent former candidate for mayor Bettina Jarasch has admitted that closing Friedrichstraße was maybe not the right symbol for the mobility revolution. On the other side of the political divide, the FDP and the AfD are delighted by the reopening. Local residents will now be consulted on a holistic traffic vision for the area as a future-focused policy from the new coalition.
I have to laugh because I think a holistic traffic vision is more cars. The same transport senator, Manja Schreiner, doesn't believe that bike paths need to be as wide as they are. She said, we have to be pragmatic. When there isn't enough room for a wide bicycle path, a narrow one is better than none at all. Holistic traffic vision. More cars.
So I want to unpack what this new Senator Manja Schreiner said. And by the way, I think we need like a theme song for her because she is going to be our new villain for the next few years. Yeah, really, we need a leitmotif. Every time this name comes up now, we are not. I promise you, she's bad news. Firstly, there's always enough room for a bike path. But what she means is there isn't enough room for a car lane, a car parking strip, and a bike path. So clearly she's going to be prioritizing car traffic. And second, there's actually a law that says that bike paths do have to be wide. They have to be wide enough for one cyclist to overtake another safely. That's in a law called the Berlin Mobilitätsgesetz. It came into force in 2018, and it gives pedestrians, cyclists, and public transport priority over private vehicles. And in 2020, a cyclist used this law to sue the city government to force it to widen a bike path which goes over the Oberbaumbrücke. It was too narrow, you couldn't overtake safely, and the government had to widen it to 2 meters. And there are some experts who say that 2.5 meters is the minimum needed for safe overtaking. So our new traffic senator appears not to know the law or be willing to ignore it.
Manja Schreiner.
And the same senator has said people have to park their cars. Can I give her an annoying voice?
Yeah, like a German accent.
People have to park their cars somewhere. The government can't simply come and say, there are no more parking spots. Okay, that's too bad. No. Well, actually, the same...
A register above that, please.
What?
One register above that.
No, I'm just going to read it normal. The same senator has said people have to park their cars somewhere. The government can't simply come and say there are no more parking spots. Well, actually, it literally can. What she means is cars have a right to occupy our public space.
Okay, so here's another one and another accent. Mobility is different and individual. I am not in favor of judging that. Meaning...
She's Dutch now?
Yeah, obviously. People have a right to drive their cars anywhere. Really? So what about public health or the burning planet? More on that later.
So that one's interesting. Mobility is general and individual and different. I am not in favor of judging people's mobility choices. I mean, isn't that what a government has to do to make the best choice for us? Like, you have to judge people's mobility choice and say that some mobility cannot happen because it's damaging our health and the planet. Like, to say that, you just choose how you get around. You know, whether you want to get around in a terrible polluting car. I'm not going to judge that. But that is the job of government, is to judge those decisions and say some of them are not allowed. But she wants to get out of doing that.
She's like, you do you, but you doing you better be in a car, because otherwise I don't care.
Right, exactly.
Like, go and die. Oh, oopsie. Yeah, sorry, no space.
So cyclists, we need to get ready to defend our rights, which might be more than just ringing our bells angrily at cars.
We are sitting in a spot in Tempelhof Park, as we told you, but it is a spot that is actually under threat. This very area, which is the urban garden near the skate strip and the Grillplatz at the Neukölln-Schillerkiez end, has been marked as a potential development site by the CDU-SPD government. To build here, they would need to overturn the results of a 2014 referendum in which the citizens loudly and clearly said, never build on Tempelhof.
But the new government doesn't seem to care about observing the results of referendums, and we are now waiting to see how it will react to the result of another big referendum that won with a huge majority, the so-called Deutsche Wohnen und Co Enteignen referendum, in which 59% of voters told the government that they want large housing companies to be expropriated and their apartments turned into government-owned properties. But what hope does this referendum result now have under the new SPD-CDU government? Well, to update us on the latest from DW & Co Enteignen is our good friend Wouter Bernhard. Welcome to the park, Wouter.
Hello.
So, Wouter, give us an update. How is the campaign faring? What is the status under the new government? Last time around, the old government said they were going to study this referendum and maybe get back to us after an expert commission had told them whether it was a good or a bad idea. And now we've got a new government, which we don't really have much hope from for anything progressive. So what's the campaign's feeling about it all?
We're doing great. We've been invited over for some coffee and tea. We're going to spend some time with the new mayor, and we're going to talk about some good housing investments on Tempelhofer Feld. I'm excited.
Have you really been invited to tea? Is that what's happened?
I don't think anybody gets invited for tea at Kai Wegner's office. I mean, he's keeping his plans to himself, his plans for Berlin.
Apart from if you're a real estate owner and investor, like his the big contributor to his campaign in 2020, who then on record actually said, yes, I'm giving him this money and I have a lot of policy expectations in return, which is now being investigated for campaign violations.
But seriously, there's an expert commission that is still yet to report back about what it believes should happen, isn't there? That still actually they still have to hand in their report.
Yeah, so we are less excited with the current mayor, even though that was nearly possible with Franziska Giffey being our previous mayor. We're less excited with Kai Wegner being there. They have made a coalition treaty in which they have not given the expropriation or nor the referendum much room, but our demands remain the same. 60% of the people voted in favor for the referendum. That keeps being more than any of the coalition treaties that all these previous governments ever had. So basically, what we're doing is the exact same thing as that we've been doing for the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It's demanding that the people of Berlin get what they voted for.
But the expert commission is supposed to return its results, in a couple of weeks? Is that right?
By the end of June, the expert committee that has been put in motion by the previous government has given an assignment. Okay, the referendum said we want expropriation. We're going to check and see how that goes. There is a committee now. There is 13 people, 13 experts involved in trying to figure out whether expropriation is possible. And we are expecting the results by the end of June.
And what would be the positive results of the positive results from this committee, and what would be the negative?
Well, let's start with the unlikely event that it would be a negative report. They would basically say, we've checked the law. It is not possible. Unfortunately, you can't do expropriation. Or they say it's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. Sorry, you can't do it. We already know that they're not going to say this. We had an intermediary report by December which clearly stated that all of the committee members see a way forward. They see that it is possible. Legally, you can just do the expropriation as we have it planned or have it envisioned. And not only that, they've also said that they can clearly do it under below the estimates that our opponents have always been screaming at. So we're basically awaiting a report by the end of June that will say expropriation is possible. It is clearly doable. You have your budget. You have enough money in your budget to do it. And that will be our call again to put pressure on our representatives to say there is literally nothing that you can do to back out of this.
And what are the arguments that they are using to not move forward and to quote unquote back out of this?
The arguments have always been the same. As soon as they realized that so many people in Berlin voted for this, they couldn't say, "Oh, it's not possible anymore." So what they're now doing is, okay, it is possible. So we have to really, really carefully check to see how we can actually implement that. And one of the things that they've been floating, also in the coalition treaty, the new coalition treaty, is the idea of a Vergesellschaftungsrahmengesetz, which is basically a law to confirm what is already there, namely that it is possible. So they're saying, "Oh, we need to have this new law. We have to get this new law checked. That will take us a couple of years, and then we can actually do what you guys want." That's their strategy at the moment.
So they're not just coming out and saying no. That's interesting.
They can't. How can they say no?
The people have said they want it. The experts have said they can do it. And basically, it's just their agenda that says they don't want to.
I mean, Franziska Giffey has, in the last elections, has been going so far as to say, "I know it's all possible. I know financially we can do it. I just don't like it. I just don't want to do it. I can't get it over my good conscience not to do it." And the CDU has said, basically, that's against our values.
Wasn't there another delay tactic that was that the Greens were employing in their election campaign, where they were saying, yes, we love Deutsche Wohnen, Co Enteignen, we will implement it, but first we need to do a registry? Wasn't that the Green campaign where they were saying we need to register every single household in Berlin, and that could take up to 50 million years?
No, you do need to have a registry if you want to know. If you want to expropriate 240,000 houses, or more specifically, what we demanded was the expropriation of houses from firms that have more than 3,000 houses, then you need to know who are these firms. Lots of firms and companies, they have there's very dodgy registers. They have them registered in tax paradises. How do you say, Briefkastenfirmen? I don't know exactly how you translate that.
Letterbox companies?
Yeah, exactly. So you do need to figure out so that you can actually expropriate the right people. You can actually do it way faster, though. It doesn't take 15 million years.
Okay, another angle on all of this. What hope is there for referendums in Berlin? We've just seen this referendum, which is clearly being ignored and being pushed to the side and can kick down the road, all those cliches. The referendum about Tempelhof, they're trying to overturn that by having another referendum, it should be said. But clearly they're going to try and cynically manipulate that in their favor. And the government has far more powers to manipulate referendums than people do, because they get to set the terms of how referendums are held. So there's a chance that they might win that referendum just by their own trickery. I for one hope not. But we're in this situation where we have this government where clearly referendums are so utilized, they're so cynically utilized just for governments to do what they want. Should we even bother with referendums anymore? I mean, is this an instrument that is just dead in terms of democracy?
This is officially a question we are going to ask every episode, seeing as we asked it last episode as well. Carry on, Wouter.
I don't know. I think it's an incredibly important tool in our democracy, and I would be the last to say that we don't need it anymore. If you see the sort of impact that 60% of the people voting for this referendum had. I mean, we're 2 years on. People are still talking about it. People are still livid about their living situation, because that's what this is about. This is about people getting kicked out of their houses, people not being able to afford Berlin as it is anymore. I mean, only recently we're now talking with a neighborhood project in Neukölln owned by Convivio, one of the expropriation candidates. And their main model is to buy up houses, to renovate them, and then to sell them off. And that just means that the people living there can't afford it. Their whole business model is to drive these people, the former residents, out. And we need to see that this is not a livable future for Berlin. So I think we just need to stick to it.
Referendum or no? Got to find another way to get it done then, don't we?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Joel. Like it's like it's time to move past. Like, we've established the referendum as a valuable tool to show what we want. It's not a tool beyond that, and that doesn't mean that it's not a useful tool in that nature. But now it's time to say, okay, how do we make this happen without the government's help? And that's the time to start that where we have to organize. We have to move capital that exists in this city away from bank and investors, to move real estate and land ownership away from these big companies through things that are already viable without the government's help. Okay, we can use money to create a socialist communist paradise.
I was like, wait, is Dan just trying to be like, we're going to start the revolution?
I am.
Which I get it. Like, let's overturn the system, obviously, because the system is not working with the
Matilda. I'm not saying let's overturn the system. I'm saying like let's use the tools of the system, which is money and well, no, that's it. To dismantle it or to make it work for the people who don't already have tons of money. The only difference between the owners and not is capital. Capital can exist for the people.
Or I would say horizontally speaking, just like on totally like going with what you're saying, but also just on another line here. You know, Deutsche Wohnen and Co Enteignen started off as a referendum campaign, but I think it is now a political motivator. I think it is now within the political imagination, and I think it's something that is going to stay with us for years. And whether it becomes its own political campaign in the future, whether it elects its own politicians in the future, it will constantly be talked about in every single election campaign. People will always have to go back to it. It will be like climate. People are always going to have to answer questions about Deutsche Wohnen and Co Enteignen, at least until we have some form of implementation.
But I think in terms of something that we want, if we're going to compare it to climate, we could also maybe this is something we could do something about. I mean, like real estate, within the realm of Radio Spätkoff listeners, even, we have the power. Yes, we are. That's true. We have the power to actually affect this change. We don't on the environment whatsoever.
Do you know, I think what's worth maybe... We need this Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen, what you're doing, the lobbying, right? The formal political way of doing it. I think maybe Berlin citizens need to establish a second spear that's got a bit of different antics, you know? Maybe a bit more radical, a bit more aggressive, right? We need both together, working together.
But also, we've seen the effect of radical, aggressive forms of protest on environmental policy. It's not effective.
That's not true, actually.
Okay,
We'll talk about that in our next segment.
Let me just say this. In terms of the people that we know that supported Enteignen, right? This massive percentage of people that we know support it. That group of people. Excuse me, hon. That group of people can act collectively to actually make a change in a way that they cannot with the environment. And I feel like the next step for Deutsche Wohnen and Enteignen is to organize towards making changes within the system without having to make adjustments to how our government makes policies.
And that is what we're currently working on. I mean, what we've seen now is a 2-year process in which we are lobbying the actual politicians to put expropriation into place. But another rail that we've been developing over the past couple of years is literally organizing, to go into the communities and see what people are struggling with. That's what we've seen in our Kiez teams. We have 12 Kiez teams all over Berlin. We were successful in almost every Bezirk in our referendum. And now is it time to focus again on those communities to see what help they need, to help them fight their evil landlords, and to sustainably organize those communities. It takes time. It just takes a long time to actually get that going.
Wouter, thank you so much for coming and updating us. Thank you for keeping the fight alive, and I hope we hear more about the campaign and that this is not the end, and that whatever Kai Wegner and his government say,
never,
there will be more to hear about from this campaign. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Work for a tech company in Berlin? Do you sometimes wonder if your startup boss is giving you all your rights? Do you know what to do if you think you're being screwed? To tell us how tech workers can fight for their rights is Yonatan Miller from Berlin Tech Workers Coalition. Welcome, Yonatan.
Welcome, Yonatan.
Thank you for having me here.
So, Yonatan, what is the Berlin Tech Workers Coalition? What is the background and its goals?
So before we talk about the Berlin Tech Workers Coalition, there was this larger tech workers coalition in San Francisco, the heart of Silicon Valley. That was formed in 2014 as kind of a coalition of Google software engineers and the service tech workers, so the people who were cleaning the large campuses in Silicon Valley, janitors. And so in Berlin in 2019, 4 years ago, we formed. We realized, we have... Living in Berlin, in Germany, we have many strong labor laws, but they're not very useful if the largely migrant tech workforce doesn't know what those rights are. And so me and a couple of other people, we didn't know what we were doing, but we were convinced there was a need for something like this. And so we met up, in a place like this, and we decided to call ourselves Berlin Tech Workers Coalition. Going forward years later, some of our successes have been we formed works councils, which is kind of a... peculiar German labor structure in over 30 different tech companies. So tech companies like SoundCloud, HelloFresh. We're in the process of forming them in Spotify and other companies. I myself am a Works Council chair. So previously I've been doing software development for the past 9 years. But now I do labor rights full-time. And so despite being a migrant who's not fully familiar with the German legal system, I'm now, one of the first lines when it comes to my coworkers asking for support, whether it's harassment, whether it's pay gaps, or whether it's, what about that movie night that was canceled? Is there something we can do about that? All of the above is tech issues.
So I have a question. I know in the US, companies are very hostile when unions try and form. How do German startups react when you try and form a works council? SoundCloud and all these companies, are they happy about it?
This is actually a huge tension, and I would also say one of the kind of, we're seeing the limitations or the borders of kind of labor law in that most of these tech companies are multinationals. So what does it even mean to say American tech company or German tech company? SoundCloud is in Berlin, in London, and I think it's New York, but it might be San Francisco, one of the U.S. cities. And so you have a culture that's very globally oriented, sometimes from a more Berlin or European approach, and sometimes from a more, Silicon Valley, California ideology. So in most cases, they talk about we're one global family. We don't need these outdated unions or laws that are nationally based. So in some cases, like Amazon is a perfect example where the second largest market is in Germany, but with a very American approach to union busting and to kind of a union avoidance. So either it's very punitive or, it's a culture where there's no need for unions or works councils. And so HelloFresh was one of those cases where you had a union busting case in the United States in early 2020, but it's headquartered in Berlin, so you could argue it's a Berlin company. And so Berlin employees, were very vocal, that this didn't fit with their values or their kind of expectations. And then the company started to clamp similar style union busting in the Berlin offices. So about 3 years later, you finally have a works council, but it's been a long road.
As I was perusing the website, one of the goals was to fight gentrification. So in some ways that feels sort of antithetical to the culture of bringing more tech workers to Berlin, but it's also a wonderful goal. How do you guys go about doing that?
Earlier in your show, you were talking about this Amazon tower, and initially, the Berlin Tech Workers Coalition was one of the launching partners of the Berlin versus Amazon Alliance. And a lot of people were asking, what are you doing in the room? You are the problem. If you go away, that would solve half gentrification in Berlin. And, there is some truth to that, but also, I challenge, tech workers may have very different realities. And again, that's not talking about all tech workers, but there are tech workers who make 100,000 euros a year, who aren't worrying about, living month to month on paycheck. But even with that amount of money, you're not a homeowner. You're not able to speculate on the economy. And so in that sense, all tech workers are also part of the rentier class and are, they may be gentrifiers. I'm not denying that aspect, but they are not the ones who are making the key decisions about how to consolidate housing policy in Berlin. And I think if we want to win, it's not working without tech workers, so we need to bring tech workers into the anti-gentrification fight. And so with the Deutsche Wohnen expropriation campaign, tech workers were involved with setting up the apps for the door-knocking campaigns, getting their coworkers Of course, many tech workers are migrants, so they might not be able to vote in the campaign, but the suffragist aspect was also something that Berlin Tech Workers Coalition was heavily involved with.
That's interesting. I mean, I've seen the German government make strides towards accepting perhaps the idea that foreigners might be able to vote or have other rights, and it seems like this has been an issue which working class laborers or people in traditional industries have been railing for generations. In the last few years, it's gained traction. Do you think the fact that Germany wants to, or Berlin wants to compete for these types of workers is part of that change?
Definitely. I mean, there's definitely a double standard, I mean, when you talk about even the new coalition, they're not anti-immigrant in an absolutist sense. There's a demarcation of the good and the bad migrants, and a lot of the tech workers, high-paid tech workers, blue card visas, those are the so-called good immigrants. My hope is, some of these reforms, if it's about easing the citizenship requirements on federal level or, the ability to stay in Berlin, I hope that can have a positive impact for all migrants. But we need to be very careful that it doesn't just, further entrench these inequalities. And so a lot of the challenges also in organizing, it wasn't until 1972 that non-German citizens could become Works Council members. So, 50 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do this here as a privileged migrant. So my hope is that these benefit all migrants and all sectors, not just the tech industry. And, I don't think the tech industry is actually that interesting or special when you talk about the issues. But if people love to hype the tech industry with ChatGPT, AI, whatever. If this can have a positive impact for other sectors, why not?
So I have a question. Here it says you have these salary inspections that happen inside of these tech firms. And I wondered, have you seen massive disparities that we see, for instance, in the rest of society between male and female employees? And what is the Workers' Council trying to do against salary disparities?
Absolutely. I mean, in general, within the European Union, so not talking about the rest of the world, but within the EU, Germany is the third most unequal when it comes to wage disparities. It's 88 cents for women for every euro that a man makes. But when you look at the tech industry, it's even more unequal. So
really?
It's even more exacerbated. And a lot of tech companies, it's illegal, but they put in the contracts, you're not allowed to discuss salaries with your coworkers. And this can't be enforced, but, it sets the standard, which is tech companies don't want you to talk about your working conditions. And so I would say works councils are without doubt one of the strongest ways to enforce salary inspections. So it's not just a matter of looking abstractly at men and women, because there's a lot of ways to kind of juke the statistics, but works councils can look at all of the people, the names, the full, complete picture, and then from there form a more comprehensive analysis. Gender is, I think, the most obvious category to look at, but also things like age, seniority, citizen, or EU citizens versus non-EU citizens. There's other metrics to look into.
Now, do you get pushback from tech workers? I mean, are there people who aren't interested in organization, who feel threatened by unionization, who don't want salary inspections, or is this something you experience organizing in this industry?
Absolutely, and I think it's for different reasons. So you have, of course, the tech bros, that we all love to hate, who absolutely benefit from all of these inequalities. So works councils or transparency is antithetical to everything they stand for. But I also think a lot of people are really nervous because tech companies, invest a lot of money and ideology into promoting themselves as family structures, as, harbingers of a new radical way of working. So the 4-day work week or like remote work setups, all this stuff. And this is why, as Tech Workers Coalition, most of us are involved with trade union organizing. We don't advertise, unions explicitly on our website because we want to be an accessible, appealing landing page for tech workers. And the other thing is, talk about the different experiences. Generally, when we talk about migrants, it has this negative connotation that migrants are unfamiliar with the local labor laws and structures. In some cases, they bring positive experiences. So, for example, our Brazilian colleagues who have like nostalgic memories from the parents or grandparents about like the ABC Island protests in Sao Paulo. But for many of our Eastern European colleagues, trade unions or labor organizing has a very uncomfortable association with kind of the USSR or authoritarianism. Whether that's fair or not, there's a negative kind of perception. And so that's something we're working a lot with.
So for people who are interested in getting involved or want to learn more about this, where should they do that?
Yeah, so we have a website, of course. I mean, tech workers, after all, techworkersberlin.com. We have a sign-up form, and I would say the best way to really get involved is to come to one of our meetings. So the third Thursday of every month, we have a general meeting, and we have different educational trainings, meetups. And in October, we're going to have the largest English-speaking conference for Works Council members in Germany. This is October 13th and 14th.
Is there anything else that's on your agenda, like the next fight, you guys? I mean, is there an issue that is really important for you to tackle coming up soon?
I think in terms of for tech workers themselves, mass layoffs have been absolutely the biggest issue. So you've been having mass layoffs at Google and Meta, like Facebook, Shopify, all these companies also in Berlin. So it's been a kind of all-hands deck kind of situation when it comes to that. But I think what hasn't been happening up until now is we've been talking about labor organizing or community organizing, but we haven't been setting a kind of a collective bargaining agenda. And so I would say this is kind of on the forefront.
Just on that, so there's mass layoffs from these companies in Berlin. How has that affected the Berlin workers? Because in other ecosystems, there's jobs for them to go to. Are these workers picking up other work, or are there a lot of unemployed tech workers in Berlin now?
So I think there are several responses, and also depending which kind of tech workers. So some positions are just permanently not being refilled. So, for example, many content writers and marketing positions are not being refilled.
And that's happening already?
Yeah, that's happening already.
Okay. I haven't started, it hasn't filtered into my social circle yet, but should we expect to hear more about that from people who've lost their jobs in tech?
Absolutely.
What I'm hearing, and I think this is mainly over in the United States, but there is a lot of people who are going from the tech sector and now moving into the transition sector, into renewables and renewable energies, and moving into this new technology that is starting like a massive expansion. So in some ways, yes, it's bad, but in other ways, it might actually provide a workforce that can then move into this this desperately needed area like transition. I just have one question for you, which is you mentioned a 6-figure salary, and I just wondered who's hiring at the moment, because I'm up for that shit. I'm down.
Okay.
You
want Bitcoin?
Yonatan, thank you so much for joining us out here in the Feld. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to maybe an update in October when you've had this very large conference.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me in one of the nicest parks in Berlin.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's a climate emergency that is turning parts of our planet uninhabitable and contributing to a drought that is killing trees and drying up lakes right here in Berlin and Brandenburg. But spare a thought for the car drivers, because climate activists are blocking the roads. What should we do with those students, pensioners and hippies? Treat them like terrorists, of course.
So last week, 150 police personnel raided the homes and businesses of 15 homes and businesses connected to Letzte Generation, targeting 7 activists between the ages of 22 and 38 who are being investigated on suspicion of forming a criminal organization. And if you think that sounds Kafkaesque, it frickin' is. Okay, so this was a raid, a razzia, that was initiated by the Bavarians down south, and they initiated this on a federal level. So this was all over the country. There were these 150 police personnel raiding homes all over the country, and included in that was the home of Carla Hinrichs. So she is for many the face of the organization. So she's the main Pressesprecherin. So she talks to the press. And she claims that the police actually pointed a gun at her face and forced her out of bed during the raid at her apartment. The police are now being investigated for the way that she was arrested. So they have also frozen 1.4 million euros in donations that Letzte Generation have received, because this is now under suspicion of being a criminal organization, or under suspicion of being created into a criminal organization. And police are also investigating allegations that two members of Letzte Generation have been involved in planning to sabotage an oil pipeline between Italy and Bavaria.
For context, Letzte Generation, or Last Generation, are a group that formed in early 2022 and started stopping traffic by gluing themselves on the street and causing large and long traffic jams. They've performed hundreds of street blockades. Berlin police have issued over 4,000 criminal complaints against the activists. Hefty sentences are now being passed down. The climate activist who had glued herself to the frame of a Cranach painting in the Gemäldegalerie last August has been sentenced to 4 months in prison without probation. Carla Hinrichs has a 3-year sentence on parole where she will have to complete 60 hours of community service and could be called to jail at any point in that sentence if her parole conditions are violated.
Our tough on crime new CDU Mayor Kai Wegner has not missed the opportunity to swing into hysteria, saying that he wants to free Berlin from the hostage of these chaotics. That's a quote. He wants to create a hostile environment for the protesters by having prosecutors on site to collect evidence quickly and get the activists prosecuted immediately so they can't return to re-stick themselves to the road. His other cunning plan is to try to force climate activists to pay for damage to property themselves.
So, naturally, I'm on the side of the climate protesters, even though I do feel like a huge hypocrite because I have flown around the world on holidays. And I think all of us, in some ways, can find well, maybe I should just speak for myself. I feel like a hypocrite, and I see these people actually doing something. And I think, these people are heroes, and they are actually taking action and putting themselves on the line for something that really does matter. And here we are, treating them like terrorists. So the devil's advocate question, and this is for you, Izzy, since you are researching all these topics, is are these forms of protest effective, or are they actually putting more people offside? I mean, you've got all these thousands of car drivers who now hate the climate activists because they've been delayed getting to work, which is strange. Who cares about being late for getting to work? But are we actually turning people off the climate movement with this kind of strategy?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is the main question, and it's a question that I think you'll encounter a lot when you have conversations about Letzte Generation. I'm sure everyone's had that conversation where someone has been like, yes, I agree with them in principle, but I don't agree with how they're doing it. And I think what that's really exposing is the difficulties with what climate protesters can actually do that will be effective, okay? So when people say they should go to the sites of where this is happening, we've done that. When they say they should go to the government, they've done that. When they say they should actually be protesting in front of the firms that are causing the problems, they have done that, and they are still doing it, okay? So Lützerath, for instance, was an on-site blockade trying to stop the diggers from taking the coal out of the ground underneath a village that was going to be destroyed and is now going to be destroyed. So, I mean, the idea of there is other ways to protest that are more effective. They have done absolutely everything, and the climate movement has been incredibly inventive with its forms of protest. This is the latest iteration, and I think what's interesting about what Letzte Generation are doing is they are revealing something that is really key to reveal in order for us to get to the next stage of actually action on climate change, because I think we can do something to avoid catastrophic climate change. And I don't agree that it's all lost and we can't do anything about it. Of course we can do something about it. We just have to actually make that jump. And what Letzte Generation are revealing is that when it comes to climate action, people say, yes, I'm all for the government doing more. But when the government actually does something, they say, oh, no, please, I don't want to pay for it and I don't want to be inconvenienced. And so the manner of this protest, by holding people up in traffic, by putting people at a level of inconvenience that they are not used to, people are saying, I hate this method of protest, but they're also implying, I don't want to do anything to stop the climate crisis from getting worse, all right? Because how will we stop the climate crisis from getting worse? We have to stop driving cars to the volume that we're doing it. We have to slow down the speed on motorways. We have to switch our gas boilers to other methods of heating that are based on renewable energies. And we have the heating bill going through the German parliament at the moment. And lo and behold, the political conversation has all been about, well, who's going to pay for this? They don't want the taxpayer to pay for it. Political parties are saying they don't want individuals to pay for it. Political parties are saying they don't want the owners of houses to pay for it. Political parties are saying they don't want the renters to pay for it. Who's going to pay for this? It's this thing of like, yes, the manner of these protests are essentially inconveniencing people, and that is what climate policy will do. Climate policy will inconvenience us, but the alternative is deadly. Okay, so it's like, do you want to be inconvenienced and do you want to pay for a better future, or do you want people to starve en masse? Do you want fires to occur commonly in Brandenburg and burn down every single one of our forests? Do you want to go to a lake and have it shriveled up to absolutely nothingness? Do you want Hassenheider to die in front of us? So these are the alternatives. And it's not hyperbole. It's literally like you have that choice. To be inconvenienced or to face mass death.
I obviously completely agree, and I'm absolutely on the side of all of this. I just think that particularly in Germany, and what has been my experience also sort of with activism and like mobility, no, you don't say that in English, activism in Germany, is that the concept of inconveniencing oneself is, to the average German citizen who has the ability to not inconvenience themselves, impossible to fathom until they see in front of themselves the destruction. And of course we're seeing it, right? There are signs left, right, and center. But as long as they can still live their life in the way that they want to live it, and it doesn't actually, choosing to inconvenience oneself is a very foreign idea. And so I pose the question, how do you convince people to inconvenience themselves? Is it by inconveniencing them, which is what Letzte Generation is doing? And I'm like, yeah, please. I mean, I do nothing but yell at people on the street in Berlin and try and make driving a car from Kreuzberg to Neukölln a living hell if it's what I can do. But how do you convince people to choose to inconvenience themselves is my question. It's
happened before, and I don't necessarily agree with the way you're describing German culture, German attitude towards inconvenience. There's a lot of things that have, I think in German culture, a very, very strong collectivism that implies a lot of annoying individual habits. Like, we like to make fun of recycling or how different things that are done here, font system, things that are inconvenient and a part of daily life that go without question. And I've seen it happen in America. There was a time when people littered incessantly. And then we just said, don't litter. Just don't litter. And we said it all the time, and they stopped. And so, you can get people used to inconvenient things, and regardless of what country, and those are not two countries that I would either of them tend to say are Americans don't want to take on individual responsibility, but they don't throw trash out their windows of the cars anymore.
I'm talking primarily about mobility and cars. The car is the symbol of freedom to a lot of people, and it is the most common reaction to you cannot have your own car in the city. It is irresponsible, and it is going to destroy the climate. You're taking away my freedom. You're taking away my freedom of movement. And the car is German symbolism for freedom, for post-war Germany, where everyone's goal to show that they had made it was to have a car, where entire cities were destroyed and rebuilt for cars. This country after the war, was not rebuilt for people. It was rebuilt for cars. And so we're basically saying it's basically like, can you sort of accept that you fucked up real bad? Can you say it?
I mean, I feel like German culture has proven its ability to do that.
I just disagree somewhat.
Good point, well made on both sides. But I think one thing that we can look to in order to maybe not just show people that climate policy will be an inconvenience to them, but also encourage people to move from one thing to the other, is we saw how effective the €29 ticket was, right? That was arguably a system change level policy.
You mean the €9 or the 29?
Sorry, yeah. The €9 ticket and then the €29 ticket. The €9 ticket over the summer last year was what could be a total system change policy. It's the kind of policy that we saw the dramatic numbers, the amount of people that were picking it up, the amount of people that were using it, and the amount of car journeys that went as a result.
Absolutely, but that's phrasing something as an entitlement and not a restriction. And I think any society, any culture is going to move towards that. So Americans, like, they hate socialism or whatever, but if you can't take away their social security. They don't know that's, you know, that for Germans to say, here, you're now, everyone gets, we're not going to take care of these universal things that, and I think Germany is a good example of a country that applies entitlements universally. So give that, you know, and frankly, I don't think we need to be so focused on individual choices. I mean, it is that Joel feels guilty about flying when it's not relevant. The amount of flying he does is not relevant statistically, and it won't be. And none of the entire group of people he represents, because he's not in the top flyers. He's not a business traveler who's constantly in the air. Those people have issues that we need to confront them with. And constantly nagging us, me and Joel, and Matilda and you, and Yuri, and Harvey to do these things is not the right thing. Give us entitlements universally and attack the top percentage of the polluters and the users and tax them and fight them, because honestly, like, that is something that is going to be a lot easier to rally around than just being like, don't drive, because we do live in places where we have to. And to me, it's a mistake to constantly do that, because that's somewhere we can also make a slow change towards away from fossil fuels.
I agree with what you're saying. And I also enjoyed your rant very much, Izzy.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, I think you said Letzte Generation or climate activists in general have done everything. They've gone to the politicians, they've gone to the businesses. They haven't done everything, right?
And if you want to
I've
hear
just
more
read
on this,
fellow Berliners. I just read fellow Berliner Andreas Malm's book. I just want to shout that out while we're on this, right?
is he a fellow Berliner?
How to blow up a pipeline.
Right.
I believe he lives in Berlin still. He makes a fantastic case. It's a super quick read, but a really, really good, logical, really clear case for actually maybe becoming violent towards property.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And that is something that no one has done
I
yet.
don't think any
There's
of
a
us
whole
here
new
are
level.
against it in principle.
Yeah, he talks about sabotage.
Can I just say, just very quickly, maybe to wrap this up a bit?
Yeah.
If that's okay.
I'd like to wrap it up with a plug.
Okay, let's wrap up with a plug.
Okay, so if you want to hear about all of the other things that the climate movement has done in Germany, and they've done it all.
What have you been up to?
I have been with our producer, Anna-Marie Harrison. We have been interviewing members of the climate movement, people who've been active in the climate movement for 2 decades, people who've been active in the climate movement for 2 months. So we've been interviewing those over the last 4 months or so and creating a podcast. And this will be a spin-off 4-episode podcast. It will be accessible in your feeds in the next month or so. We're going to start dropping episodes over the summer, and you'll be able to hear about what the German climate movement has been up to over the past 2 decades, and also whether we think it's not radical enough or too radical, and if what's working and what doesn't work.
That's so cool. I can't wait to listen.
Yes.
And
Does it have a
just
cute title yet?
I'd like to say one last thing.
Okay.
I do agree. I don't think the individual is responsible at all.
Yeah, no.
I mean, for the love of God, all I want to do is overthrow the system and get them. But the thing is, they ain't doing it. We're not getting the tickets. A parking spot in Berlin costs 25 euros for 2 years. It's still cheaper to get fossil fuels. They don't care. Let's try to care. Am I going to change anything with my individual choices? No. Joel, fly. Let's do whatever we got to do. But at the same time, cars are not freedom.
Okay.
Burn them down.
Time for a jingle, I reckon.
Yeah.
Kauf.
Beep, beep, boop, boop, beep, beep, bap, bap, beep, beep.
Okay,
I've been up doing it.
we're very close to the end of our special outdoor recording of Radio Speakoff here in Tempelhoferfeld. But before we wrap up, we are
One
gonna
important
finish
segment to go.
with the
Oh my
sports
God,
news.
yeah.
And
Yuri,
this section
what is
called-
sports?
Jöran explains Hertha.
Yeah, this is a recurring theme over the last few years already, I reckon, that I've spoken about Hertha. And Hertha
being the-
Hertha Berlin, the biggest Berlin football club in the West, in Charlottenburg, is their home. Hertha are fucked. Excuse me. After a dismal second half of the season, they finished in last place and are going down to the second league officially. So 4 years after receiving a cash injection of €374 from investor Lars Windhorst, their story proves now that money still isn't everything in sports. Ever since this investor got involved, Hertha has been on a downward spiral, and there have been star acquisitions, publicly staged power struggles, and multiple bizarre changes in management and coaching staff. Hertha has been producing a lot of good stories, but not many of them on the pitch. And ironically, this is a little fun fact, since the first season with the new investor on board, the total market value of Hertha's players dropped from 217 million to just 92 million euros today. So it's been a downward spiral, and now they are losing their place in the top league. And this, of course, has consequences.
But just before we get to the consequences, they didn't just fall out of the league, did they?
They're now Zweite Bundesliga.
But they fell out spectacularly, didn't they? They went from they weren't even like, they were the next nearest from the bottom of the table were like 6 points ahead of them or something, weren't they? They were like super bad. They weren't
I don't think
bad.
they were all time the worst, but they were quite shit, and they were already relegated to the second league before the last match day.
Wow.
So this does, of course, have consequences, and one of them being no new stadium in sight anytime soon. For years, the club has been demanding that the city help it build a new, smaller but more exciting stadium instead of playing at the huge Olympia Stadium, which never sells out and has fans sitting very far from the playing field. Now, most politicians say that's not going to happen with public money, and it's unlikely the club can raise enough private money to build anything. And in fact, Hertha will now ask the city to give them a reduction in rent for using the old stadium, which the city has actually granted them the last 2 times they were relegated.
The one rent reduction in the city that gets granted.
Yes. Let's see how Hertha goes with the CDU government on that one. Right, and it might get even worse for Hertha, though. They are still struggling because they might lose their license to even play in the second league. And so to obtain this license, each club every year has to prove that they have enough financial runway to run for the whole season. And despite the investor millions, Hertha have been running a deficit for years and have acquired a lot of debt, which they now have to pay back in November. And their plan is to just ask the debtors for an extension. Easy, right? Deadline for this is June 7th, and it is a nail-biter. But there is a bit of hope for Hertha. In March, a new investor took over the shares previously owned by shady investor Lars Windhorst. Miami-based 777 investment company has vouched to support even in case of relegation, which has now happened. And 5 games before the end of the season, they brought back their old coach and club legend, Paul Dardai, who left amongst disagreements with with Hertha's now former head of sports. Right, so they're bringing back an old pal. They have a new kind of wind from Miami going through their things, and they won their last game actually in quite convincing fashion. So who knows, maybe a breather in the second league and a regrouping will do the club some good, and we will see them back in the top flight before long.
Now just can I ask you, you told me the other night you went to a Hertha bar, so how are the Hertha fans of Berlin coping with this? I mean, like, are they just head in their hands crying? What are they doing?
I mean, they've been bottom of the ladder for quite a few weeks, so I think everyone's been emotional. They've like pre-grieved, I think.
Because you see these bars all around Berlin with the blue and white signs. This is where the fans gather to watch the games. There can't be good atmosphere in there when the games are on.
Better than the stadium.
Have you never just suffered together with a lot of people? It can be fun.
Actually, it is helpful. I went to watch my team's final game of the season yesterday.
Who's your team?
Dramatically lost. Bayern Munich again won the fucking championship. And I went to a bar just so I wouldn't be home alone with this. And it was very, very helpful.
Yuri, who's your team?
Dortmund. We dramatically lost.
One other thing to pick up on, you said that this has happened before in the club's history. They've been relegated before.
Yeah, they've actually been relegated, I think, 6 or 7 times in their history. So that's since the 60s.
But they've spent like the last couple of, like, at least since I've been in Berlin, they've been in the top league, right? So it's been a while since they've been in the bottom league.
But it seems like everything Hertha touches crumbles to shit.
It seems like that. So maybe,
It's just an elevator that never stops and once in a while just kills you. That's...
Hertha is the paternoster of football.
But do you know what? I want to tell you also about the east of the city and football. Because meanwhile, Köpenick's Union Berlin have been on a very much opposite trajectory. On the last match day of the season, they secured the 4th spot in the ladder and qualified for the Champions League, the biggest European competition. So they'll be potentially up against the likes of Real Madrid, Manchester United, and so on. It doesn't get bigger than that. And each year in the league, they have steadily improved from 11th to 7th to 5th and now to 4th place. And they have managed this without any outside investment, which actually would go against their club ideals. And to illustrate this, one line in their club hymn, written and recorded by East German punk legend Nina Hagen. How good is this? So the line goes, Wer lässt sich nicht vom Westen kaufen? Eisern Union. So that is, who won't be bought by the West? Iron Union. Right? What a story they're writing for underdogs everywhere.
Fantastic. So this is the end of the saga of Hertha for now. They've dropped out of the top league, and all along you've been hearing their fantastic tragedy explained beautifully by our own Jöran Mandik. Thank you so much for your reporting on this over the years.
It's absolutely such a pleasure. All right, I guess that's the end of the show.
I think that's
Yes, we will be back. We'll be back soon with another live episode. In between now and then, we'll be dropping Izzy's spin-off. Sir, did you have anything you want to add?
Spinning.
Now's your chance, dude. No, you don't. You say it. If you want to say it, you say it. Okay, then there's no more news to report, and you can always. I think me and Matilda's usual plugs still stand.
Yes, please come to Comedy Cafe Berlin or follow me on Instagram to find out about other shows that I do.
And I have a new tour. So a tour that is not social movements. It's actually going to be on German colonialism. And we're going to be doing it, or I'm going to be doing it on the 1st of July. So same meeting point, 2 p.m. on the 1st of July at the Martin Luther statue next to Alexanderplatz. So if you want to find out more about German colonialism and go on a tour around the city centre of Berlin and look at how colonialism has shaped the building of the city centre over the centuries, then please do come on that. You're most welcome.
And whether it's your football team or your business place, remember it's Union will win in the end.
Hey, I've got a plug too. Floating University is back up and running, and we've got program, workshops, all kinds of stuff. Look at the website and see when it makes sense to come down. We also have an open bar every Thursday at Floating. Come and see me there.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and watching us here at Tempelhofer. See you next time, Radio Speak
Berlin News in English.